happening now. We'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, episode 348 for February the 19th, 2025. My name is Wesley Fryer, coming to you from, yes, snowy with flurries, Charlotte, North Carolina, where I am a middle school media literacy and STEM teacher and soon to be AP computer science teacher starting Monday. And joining me as always from what appears to be a palatial Eden of green leaves, which could possibly be virtual, but I'm not at Blowing Rock, North Carolina either. It would be white and rather barren of most leaves if we were looking here. So I'm almost afraid to ask Dr. Neiffer, but what is the weather like in Montana tonight?
Terrible is the only way to describe it. I did drive back from Great Falls, Montana, which is in north central Montana today, 3 hours to my current residence town. As I mentioned in past weeks, I have been hanging out a lot with my parents in Great Falls, helping out there. And starting early last week, there was a lot of weather, a lot of snow dumping, but then finally got to go back to Great Falls, which is where I joined last week for the podcast. And then it snow started dumping like crazy. So there's probably 2 feet of snow on the ground. It continues to dump there. And then when I woke up this morning, it was negative 28. So it's pretty darn cold. And I did feel very lucky that the roads were, this is not an interstate between Great Falls and Missoula. It is a 2-lane state highway. It does go through a mountain pass, which can be a little much in the wintertime for sure. But luckily I had great roads today. I did experience, my mom very wisely told me to go start my car yesterday because it's just been sitting, mostly idle in front of their house. And so I did. And then today, and it did melt some of the snow off. I didn't scrape it off or anything. I just made sure that the engine started. So I started today, and it was a little grumpy, but my driver's side door was frozen shut. So I had to go and open it kind of from the inside to make that happen. But that's just just another winter in beautiful Montana. So it's been, I'd say, probably the most serious winter we've had in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. And you're not talking about wind chill when you're talking about that temperature, are you?
No. And Great Falls is notoriously windy. In fact, it has it has more wind on average than the city of Chicago. So I'm assuming that that the wind chill was at least in the negative 40s or if not worse last night. But they were talking about, so northeastern Montana gets our most serious winter weather by far. There are cities in the northeast that that are about 3 or 4 hours from the North Dakota border. And you start there and go east, and the winter can be very serious there. But they did have negative in the real negative 40s, and I'm assuming because north central Montana is windy, that the wind chill easily got into the negative 70s. So so this is, we have some pretty serious winter here.
That's crazy. Now, don't you probably have one of those things where you plug your car in to warm it up or keep it not from freezing?
Yeah, a bolt heater, I do. But of course that requires that you string out power to it, right? So
Yeah.
That's fine. In our house, we have an attached garage that has a power outlet outside of it. And we both park in the driveway in front of the garage, and it's easy to plug in. And my mom has her car in the garage, but I would have to string out an extension cord from the house. And that's probably 50, 60, 70 feet. So yeah. And now that said, my parents have an infrastructure in place, especially when they had 2 cars, where my dad's truck was usually in front and my mom's car was in the garage. And so they would string out, big orange extension cord, and then they'd have to kind of elevate it over the sidewalk. And then, so that's just Montana winter for you. So a head bolt heater is a common accessory here, and if it doesn't come standard, then that's if you're a Montana driver, that's the first thing you do is go install a head bolt heater in your car.
Oh, man, my dad had those in Kansas, but not And I think the temperatures, the phone, it's wild, flipping through because I've got, where all our kids live in different states, and
Mhm. Yeah.
it's single digits, with I think maybe Kansas City getting to -2, but nothing quite like what you've got. Well, that is quite a weather update, which I do enjoy. So I can see you're aspirationally in the springtime, summer. What is it that we are going to do this evening?
Well, as much as I'd like to turn this into the weather situation room, we are the EdTech situation room. So, Dr. Fryer and I have scoured the internet for an endless amount of time the last 7 days to look for the news articles that we think could provide the most insight for schools and educators. And tonight, we have some AI news, which is probably not a real surprise. And I see Dr. Fryer has done an excellent job of categorizing our AI news. There was some Apple news today, including a new iPhone release. Some social media news, privacy news, quantum computing, our miscellaneous category, and then we'll end tonight with our Geeks of the Week. Dr. Fryer, where would you like to start us off tonight?
Well, I also think we can kind of say this may be a break from the political news feed, because it really is can be a positive thing to not subject ourselves to the chaos and crazy. But I think maybe this is going to be, well, let's talk about Apple. I was about to jump down to quantum computing, because if you want, that's like some pretty arcane stuff, but also like possibly really game changing. But let's go to Apple. The article that I grabbed, I think you grabbed one too. This was from Apple Insider today. Apple has officially killed off the home button, and the quote I pulled out of there was, "You cannot purchase any new Apple products that feature a Lightning port." So this is a pretty big deal. The iPhone 16e is now the replacement for the iPhone SE. And if you're not looking to drop $800 for a new phone, I think you can pick one of those up for around $500. The article mentions, and I don't know if I'd known this or not, but in May of last year, of 2024, Apple stopped selling what was the 9th generation 10.2-inch iPad. That was the last of Apple's tablets that had a home button. I think that the iPad I have at school is still one of the old ones. I think maybe I'll be refreshed next year. But my wife, I got her a new Kindle over Christmas, and of course it does not use the micro USB. It now uses the USB-C. So she was just, commenting with irritation how tech companies seem to always be wanting us to buy new adapters. But I think this is a good move. This has also been, I think, pushed by Europe and some of the legal things that Europe has pushed for in terms of trying to get some standardization with USB-C. So, Dr. Neiffer, are you mourning the death of the home button? And perhaps more importantly, because you are on the T-Mobile, upgrade every 10 minutes to the new phone, I assume you're going to be getting the new iPhone. So,
I will not be getting a new iPhone SE, whatever
no,
Huckleberry this is.
right.
I will say the home button is interesting to me for two reasons. First, I'm not totally in love with Face ID. It's pretty good, and I've gotten used to it in the last couple of generations of phones. But it still requires a little more gymnastics than the thumbprint used to, and so from that standpoint, I find the iPhone facial ID to be effective, but just not as elegant as the thumbprint, right? But I also am concerned. I don't think that the Apple interfaces, either the iOS or Mac OS, or not Mac OS, iPad OS, is that intuitive for a new user on the swipe up to go home, right? And it took me a long time when I moved back to the Apple universe 4 years ago. I think it was pandemic year when I did that, and I started off with a used phone to replace I had a pretty low-end Android phone that was doing just fine because, it was the pandemic, right? So didn't really need a super great phone to be outside the house. But and in fact, I had stopped using my iPad because the swipe up was starting to interfere with the interface, even though it had that home button still. I think it was an iPad Mini 2 that I had at that time. And now that I'm used to it, right, then it's second nature to me now, right? But I do, support a lot of iPhone users, including my parents. And my mom is on an iPhone. I think it's an SE3 right now. Is
Right.
what we have for her, right?
That's the last SE, I think, isn't it? I think
Yeah,
it might
yeah,
be.
it is, yeah. And so, and we bought it used, right? Because the market on these phones it's so interesting how the lower end Apple stuff does lose value. It feels like a little more quickly than the high end stuff does. But I so it has a button still, but and I would assume this 16E is actually probably the phone we'd buy her in 2 or 3 years, right? But it does take a little while to figure out the kind of manipulation of things, and when it's the home button to start with, but also the double click to close and go to different windows. I do think that requires a little bit of dexterity and development of muscle memory. But I was just looking, the Apple port, I'm sorry, the Apple Lightning port was announced in 2012. And it was a huge game changer because, as many people remember, that would have been like the iPhone 5, I think, or iPhone 4 or 4S. But before that, remember, it was still the 16-pin adapter, which was really, really wonky, I thought. And
I'm having trouble even picturing that. That's been quite a while.
Yeah, and I have a couple sitting around here because I still have an old one. In fact, I have of course I do. I have an iPod.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I'd refurbished a couple of these during the pandemic, and actually they're still a lot of fun to play around with. And I updated this to a really high end drive that uses SD cards, and so it's pretty fast. But that Lightning port, I'm sorry, the old 16-pin port. I mean, that thing was really janky, and even the Apple OEM stuff was not as robust as you would think. And so I thought the Lightning port was just a really brilliant port. I understand why Apple moved to USB-C. I've been very happy with USB-C. I feel like there's a lot of hand-wringing around USB-C because there are issues and it's not universal and this and that. But for what I feel like for 80% of users, USB-C has been a real revelation, and I'm glad to see that they're finally out of the Lightning port business.
I dropped the link into Swapa's iPhone SE series page, and they've got third generation 2022 iPhone SEs as low as $103. And, it all depends. I really like how they've got things set up in terms of comparing models and, helping you do that shopping. And I would agree that if you've got an older parent or other adult in your life, or maybe it's you, that really doesn't want to make that transition. I'm fine with not having the home button, but that was certainly a hang up. It has been a hang up with some different older adults that I know, and but the world marches on. But I would remind everybody that whenever new phones come out, that's oftentimes a good time to take a look at the past older models. So I did have one negative experience with Swappa. That was with a computer, and something happened in the mail, and anyway, it was a bit of a mess. But with phones, we've had really good success with that, and we probably need to revisit that a little bit. I don't know. It's funny how we're still paying. All of our family is still on our cell phone plan, even though we have a 27-year-old. I mean, it's just it doesn't spend cost much more for him to be on there, but they are getting their own phones now, so that's a good transition.
Yeah.
Did they announce anything else besides the 16E, or is that pretty much it today for the
I think that was it. I would say too, the reason why I shared the news release is that I do think there's a lot of things in this phone that are likely to be likely to come to other iPhone models later this year. For example, they're now making their own modems that are integrated directly into the Apple chips. I think that's really great news because I feel like when Apple controls the whole hardware stack, that it's usually a good, elegant, and you never think about it experience.
And
for
power
users.
beneficial, right? Because the whole thing
Yes.
about battery life is huge, and the modem, when it was a play with everything Qualcomm modem, it didn't have the same battery that it has now, I guess, on the 16E.
And the other thing that's cool about the new I guess base phone is that it has the Apple A18 chip, which is the chip that appears in the non-Pro versions of iPhone 16s, and so that's actually a desktop level chip. So there's a lot of girth in that particular chip. I would also note too that this phone qualifies for Apple Intelligence, and so it's the iPhone 15s, the iPhone 16s, and now this lower end, and what it starts it's either $500 or $600. You can now get an Apple Intelligence for that. Now, I think I don't find Apple Intelligence to be terrible. But I do agree that it's underwhelming in comparison to other offerings right now. But I also presume that, and I'm not sure if we talked about this in the podcast or not, but one of the things that I perceive is that it's going to get tough pretty soon. To doubt Apple's model, because they have not gone all in on developing AI models. They've gone all in on plugging models into various parts of the operating system. So if it ends up that DeepSeek ends up creating a whole generation of more inexpensive models that can be plugged in easily into iPhones, and they've said that they aren't right now. There's ChatGPT integration, but that's not the be all end all. In fact, they're going to probably end up plugging in many different pieces. That's going to end up creating a lot of kind of interesting models there. So I still am kind of an Apple we trust guy. I think they're going to nail the AI at some point. The features that are available now are fine, right? They're not revolutionary yet, but there's a lot of trek to go before we declare winners in the AI race.
Something else, as I'm looking at the Apple press release article that you shared, is just from a web design standpoint, because I'm doing this with my middle schoolers frequently. We're analyzing web pages, and it really is kind of amazing as far as the media and the image carousels and the embedded videos and the whole story that pardon me, they are presenting here. It also occurs to me, and I don't think we're going to see this from Apple, but I think it was back in 2015 when I became a tech director. One of my colleagues, and he was teaching halftime and helping our IT staff halftime, had a Windows phone that would be a laptop, or I mean, it would be a computer, and so he could literally take this thing with an adapter and plug in keyboard, mouse, and monitor, and he had everything. And when you mentioned, hey, this 16E has a desktop level processor, we're not going to see that from Apple in terms of like, hey, all you need is a phone, because now you can I mean, Apple wants to keep selling laptops, keep selling iPads. I would be absolutely shocked if they would do that. But that's an incredible thing to say, that you've got desktop level power in your phone. And I definitely am today more and more media independent of my laptop with my phone, with the Canva app for iOS. I use Adobe Express, and certainly there's all kinds of higher end editing tools, but I don't do much high end video editing. Pretty much everything I need to do, almost, I can just do, and I do on my phone. So it really, really is stunning. And I haven't seen statistics lately, but I'm sure that mobile devices continue to be a predominant way that people are accessing the web and using the internet. And I think that the continued march and evolution of the operating systems, the capabilities, it is absolutely stunning. I showed my students the first half of my TEDx talk today from 2000, and I think it was 2013, and it was at I mentioned my iPhone 5. Does that sound right? It's just incredible how fast things have changed, and that kind of capability, and so pretty cool. Well, Did Apple, did we have any idea when they're going to bring out their other phones? Because this was basically it then for the event. It was just pretty much to bring out the SE replacement.
I think so. At least that's the news. I mean, I know that some people are looking out for a new MacBook Air that would involve an M4 chip. There's also some rumors that the MacBook Air could skip the M4 chip and go directly to an M5 chip, but that means being released later this year. Hard to know, but it looks like right now, yeah. In fact, on the front page, there's just the MacBook Air M3 right now is the MacBook Air that's there. And I have read a lot of Apple rumors is a whole industry within itself. But one of the things that I have noticed is that there's a lot of talk that Apple apparently took some criticism for introducing the M4 chip first in the iPad. And that apparently annoyed the Apple faithful. I don't remember being all that concerned about it, but the bottom line is that they're apparently not going to do that again because they faced some criticism. So
interesting. I would love to see statistics, by the way, on how many schools are still iPad schools. You know, we're an iPad 101 school, and I just don't know how common that is anymore. All right, where would you like to go next?
Well, let's do. Actually, I think the rest of the non-AI articles are yours.
Okay. Let me do the quantum computing one real quick, and then let's jump into the AI stuff. So the one that I got that is new is from today, February 19th. And there's a Google News article, several different sources. I picked up the defense one, and it says that Microsoft DARPA collaboration yields possible quantum chip breakthrough. And so we've talked about this. Quantum computing is something that's like on the horizon and promises to be a radical revolution, for instance, in encryption, because apparently most encryption algorithms that we use today for e-commerce and all kinds of other things would be rendered insecure, I think, when true quantum computing becomes available. The other thing, and this relates to talking about chips and what's on board and what kinds of AI models can run locally, is this is saying, the military, because of how important drones are and how like electromagnetic spectrum warfare is really, really huge in terms of trying to stop drones and just everything that's happening in the electromagnetic spectrum. So the potential of having a quantum chip that's going to be, small. And I mean, if you want some real arcane, acronyms, Microsoft described it as, quote, the world's first quantum processing unit, QPU, powered by a topological core designed to scale to 1 million qubits on a single chip. And it goes into some details about how this is functioning. One thing that's interesting is it says one of the attendees at the event where it was announced, who is a University of Oxford theoretical physicist, his name is Stephen Simon, told the journal, quote, would I bet my life they're seeing what they think they're seeing? No, but it looks pretty good. So the other article that I pulled up from a previous week was a Reuters article on February 5th. And this is quoting Google saying that commercial quantum computing applications will be arriving within 5 years. So these are not the kind of articles of like, hey, this is going to affect your educational technology, budget tomorrow. But, the struggle and the effort by companies to, bring more and more power to mobile devices. Certainly the Microsoft DARPA collaboration also points to, how the military industrial complex continues to be massively important in terms of technological breakthroughs. And so, anyway, those are just kind of futuristic things that don't have immediate impact on our lives. But I thought it was interesting because we talk about quantum computing from time to time.
Well, and the interesting thing about the rise of generative artificial intelligence and how much oxygen that's sucked out of the room, and also the impact that has had more broadly on the kind of political landscape right now, which again, we are not a political show, nor will we talk about that if we don't need to. But the piece that I think is super interesting is that we are there's a lot of hardware news going on right now, right? And when it comes to kind of a shift away from Intel towards ARM-based processors, or you're talking about quantum computing, or we're talking about well, there's articles every week about how major AI companies, I'm talking about places like Meta, are starting to buy up chip startups and making deals with chip manufacturers because they're trying to kind of stay ahead of the hardware requirements of artificial intelligence. But of course, that's also going to lead to better consumer level pieces as well. And I just saw an article the other day on Chrome Unboxed about that there is an ARM-based chip that is likely to be in Chromebooks in 2025 that is the fastest chip that's been in a Chromebook yet. And for that to be an ARM-based processor, right, as opposed to, and I'm trying to think of what my best Chromebook looks like right now. It's an i7 12th generation chip, I think. And it's very speedy and no lag at all, right? It's a pretty nice chip, and it has a very elegant, very speedy Chrome experience, right? If suddenly now that is relegated to second class speed, and these ARM chips well race that continues this transition away from the traditional Intel environment. So we'll have to see what that looks like, and also may make devices last longer too, right? That if they're only sipping on a battery, that means less battery degradation over time. It also means that a faster chip supported a long time by OS manufacturers. I think that could all be a very interesting thing that ends up being a very positive thing for schools.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's jump into the AI world. Where do you want to begin there?
Well, lots going on in this particular space for sure, but I want to start off with a really interesting study that was released by Microsoft. And Microsoft Research released a study, I think this was last week, that talked a little bit about that the perception was that generative AI, and these come from self-reports and just like all the research right now. In fact, I've been a part of some discussions the last couple of weeks about the data sets from the schools in Africa that have done tutoring with AI, that talked about how they were able to make up 2 years of studies in just a matter of weeks. And, it caused a hubbub. And of course, some people jumped in immediately and said it was a small end and that it wasn't very rigorous and there wasn't enough of a control. That's what early research looks like, right? That, over time we'll start to get a research base on this and have some impact on this. But they talk about how by self-reported pieces, and I think there's 300 and something folks in this study, that they felt that both the cognitive effort and also the confidence of individuals decreased when they relied on generative AI for kind of the critical thinking components of what they were pulling AI in for. And again, this is not, this is one study, early, small n. It's self-reports, which itself it can be not super reliable, but it starts this discussion. And one of the things that I feel like gets buried in the 7 ways to use AI as a teacher, or how AI is going to change the future, is that we don't talk enough about pedagogy and also the brain, right? In the same way that if we stop using muscles, they tend to break down over time and become less powerful. I think the brain works the same way, right? And we have an unbelievable amount of media over the last 100 years that talks about over-reliance on technology. Now, of course, they said the same thing about television in the 50s, and they said the same thing about rock and roll in the 60s, and they said the same thing about the personal computer in the 80s, and the internet in the 90s and the 2000s. So, it's just another, discussion we need to have. But I thought it was an interesting study, and it starts this discussion. And I agree that we need to be really thoughtful about this and, make sure that we're being extra careful about how we're introducing AI to students. And I get I think it's interesting that we mostly have a fear-based response right now about students' academic honesty, but I'm not as concerned about cheating as I am about what that does to the learning process, right? Like, it's not an academic honesty issue as much as it is, for me, a cognitive problem or a learning problem or a brain science problem. So enough rambling. Now, your thoughts, Dr. Fryer.
I started to use this language with my middle schoolers last year as we were using Flint AI to help us with our culminating scripts and slideshows on this, um, you know, uh, Fruit Loop conspiracy theory, the moon landing hoax, learning about the SIFT web literacy framework and lateral reading, and how to not fall in a rabbit hole and think, hey, we never landed on the moon. These conspiracy theories are all true. The language that I started to use was, I want you to use AI as a thinking partner, not a cheating partner.
Yeah.
And it is very challenging to kind of walk that line. I had higher quality scripts and therefore videos for these projects than I had ever had, because I let students use Flint AI, which at the time was ChatGPT based. I think they've actually moved over to Claude. And so on the one hand, I'm happy about that. But what occurs to me is just how important the assessment is, and like, what are my kids walking away from? And I need to work on this to try to get some pre-test and post-test data about, some of their perceptions about these things and their working knowledge of it. One thing I just learned yesterday, one of my students taught me, we're doing our oral history unit, and the voice memos app that comes up by default on the iPhone and the iPad has voice transcription built in. I did not know this. And so you can just make a recording, tap a button, boom, there's the transcription of what you have recorded. And I'm wondering about doing some kind of an assessment with students that's verbal, and it asks them some questions and then they have to record their answers, but then I'm able to, readily grab those transcripts and then assess those responses. I don't know. It really does, challenge us in terms of assessment, because where I could in the past have thought, oh, they've independently, written the script and come up with these ideas. I was teaching them how to prompt the system to help them brainstorm, as well as come up with, we were doing what we called half Ignite presentations. And so it was, instead of 20 slides, 15 seconds a slide, 5 minutes, we were doing 10 slides, 15 seconds. It was a 2.5-minute presentation. And anyway, you can obviously prompt it for the numbers of characters that you want to have. And I mean, the kids on their own weren't going to necessarily come up with these sophisticated prompts, but it's really challenging. But it was great to be in the midst of doing this and seeing how, they could really shortcut thinking, generate something that really sounds good, yet maybe not have done a whole lot of thinking on their own. So these are really important issues. And I think that it's incumbent upon us as teachers to not only be grappling about this, but we need to be sharing about this. And we need action research that's coming out of classrooms on some of these kinds of issues. And maybe I can get motivated and actually do some writing and some publishing about some of that, because I think it's of high interest, because anything AI is, we're talking about AI. But like, this is a huge, huge issue in terms of assessment and whether you're going to allow the uses of the tool. And if you do allow the uses of the tool, how is your assessment changing so that you have greater confidence that your assessment represents what the student can actually do independently versus, what they're able to do with these tools, which is still powerful and valuable, but like, that shouldn't, it's just different. It's just really different when you are, using something that's really giving you some superpowers when it comes, especially to writing.
Well, and we drop Ethan Mollick's name here quite a lot, but that was the point of Co-Intelligence, his book that was released about a year ago now, and he talked about the difference between the companies and industries that fire a bunch of people and try to give the remaining employees access to tools to get it done faster with less hours, versus those that teach their existing employees how to utilize AI to make the end product, whether it's customer service or physical creation of a product, better, right? And I was really inspired by that, because I think he's right that there is going to be some impacts on jobs for sure, right? Like that there's zero doubt in my mind about that. In fact, today I was listening to AI Insider, which is Jason Howell and Jeff Jarvis's podcast on AI, and they I did not dig into apparently the unemployment data. Yeah, either they supposed this or it was part of the data. I don't recall what the situation was, but there was an uptick in unemployment in January, and that it's being in part blamed on reductions in IT staff due to AI, right? And now that said, like, it feels like that if any of the jobs should at least temporarily increase, it's IT related, but cybersecurity is an example of there's a lot of energy around how much AI will help improve cybersecurity, especially from a defensive posture. But we'll have to see what that looks like. But for sure, even if students are using AI in the workforce, and that's a justification for helping students navigate around AI, that doesn't mean that the learning part goes away, right? And I've even seen some folks, and I'll admit that I'm a little more on the side of that. I do think classes do need to teach knowledge, right? It's not all exploration. There's a base of knowledge that you need to be able to then start to climb up the Bloom's ladder, right? Because otherwise, you're just kind of swimming around in knowledge as opposed to making sense of it. But in a world where students are going to have to regularly reevaluate and compare spitting back at them, maybe it makes more sense to go back more to a knowledge-based curriculum. I don't have any arguments for or against that at this point. I think everything is on the table, but this kind of thinking and learning piece really does need to be a super huge part about how we're engaging and how we really adapt teaching and learning around these new technologies.
It'll be interesting to see what my learning curve is with the AP Computer Science, but that particular course is just very prescriptive and defined, and I don't know what kinds of integrations, excuse me, or uses of AI. I mean, I don't think there's any in the current iteration of the course. But I was talking to a substitute today who was subbing for that class, and just there's a lot of future possibilities and potentials, like an AI will be able to do this, it'll be able to do this. But today, what it can do in a variety of different fields. My wife was making fifth grade, math worksheets and practice exercises for the topic she's tutoring a student on tonight, and just blown away by it. But I'm just blown away by the coding, because there is so much that it can do with coding, and it's good. I need to read Moloch's book. I need to add it to my list, and I'm enjoying diving into some books that are not political too. Just substituting some of my news media diet for other things. So I think I need to add that book to my or it was already on my list, but move it up my reading list.
Yep, it's good stuff. Actually, I've got another place to go, if you don't mind.
Can I do one more Microsoft related thing real quick, since we were right on there? So this is today. The article says Microsoft shows progress towards real-time AI generated game worlds. So think holodeck on the Star Trek, right? You can go into a world that is dynamic, and that world may not have been ever created before by anybody, because it's going to be generated on the fly by inputs that you have. There's going to be training models and things like that, but this is saying that this is sort of a holy grail. And what they revealed in this paper in the journal Nature shows how these models have advanced in a short time and how far we have to go, yada yada. It doesn't sound that impressive. Well, jump down to Geeks of the Week, and I have a couple, and I'll go ahead and do this one. One of my sixth graders shared this with me last year, and I actually, it's something that I kind of missed. This is called Oasis, and we do a bunch of Minecraft in my coding class. And this is just a demo. And at the bottom, it says it's not endorsed or authorized by Microsoft, Mojang, blah, blah, blah. It's a technology demonstration, but you can either upload a scene that you want to play in Minecraft, or go to one of the ones, Village Outpost, Mountain Meadow. And Mountain Meadow, I guess, must be busier. Well, actually, these are busier now. They're all saying waiting your turn. There's more users. So right now I can't just click on it immediately and go. But basically it allows you to use your keyboard and explore this Minecraft world, but it's being dynamically generated on the fly. This isn't a actual Minecraft world seed. And then you can have input into it. One of the challenges with this is persistence, whether like things are going to stay where they are. And, if you're, for instance, going to do something that has a plot line, you're going to want, you need persistence in the world, so everything's just not random. But after that, I also dropped a link into the blog post that they had about this. This was from October 31st of last year, and this is on GitHub. It's just a GitHub page, and it's called Oasis, a Universe in a Transformer. And so it goes into a lot of details, but talking about physics and what it can understand makes me think of Sora and some of the, critiques and things that we've seen about video-based AI and generative AI. But it's just kind of fascinating with the interest and use of Minecraft and Minecraft education that I have to see this. I don't know if this is something that I would show my kids, but it is kind of mind-blowing. And so this is the holodeck, and the holodeck in development that, folks are working on. And interestingly, like I said, that article from today sounded a bit underwhelming, like, oh, this is not really doing very well. And then you go down to Oasis and check out what they were doing at the end of October last year, and like, wow, that's pretty impressive. So
yeah, it really is. And that's one of the reasons why I very much perceive that augmented and virtual reality will step pretty seriously forward with this, right? And my organization, which is the State Virtual School in Montana, is likely in the next year to work with schools on how we can use augmented and virtual reality for the purpose of helping engage students in instruction. There is a lot of energy in Montana around middle school CTE and how it can be augmented with this. But the biggest problem I've seen so far is curricular assets and environments that really are not just gizmos, right? Not just things that are interesting, but that changes quite a bit, I think, in a world where, generated content could be a huge part of that. I did get a chance to go to the National CTE conference a couple of years ago, and the vendor floor was pretty amazing because there's some super cool stuff from virtual autopsy tables to backhoe simulators. In fact, I had a lot of fun in the backhoe simulator. But by the way, the next time I go to Vegas, you can actually in Vegas go play with an actual backhoe or other big machinery. You pay $125. They give you 20 minutes of safety training, and then you too can control a backhoe for an hour. So I'm personally very excited about that the next time I go to Vegas. But the thing that's interesting about that is that I want to say this carefully, but we don't have to have as much developed stuff in a world where it can be generated, assuming we can figure out the way to rid it of hallucinations and also be able to more specifically control exactly what the output could be made out of, or set some boundaries or some
guardrails.
Yeah, totally. Cool.
Yeah. All right. Where to next?
Well, I want to talk about two releases in the last couple of weeks. I think one of them we talked about already, but it's now available in more places. And it's the concept of deep research. And this is something that actually I saw first in Google Gemini. If you have Gemini Advanced, either through your school account or through a personal account, I picked up a free year of Gemini Advanced through a Chromebook purchase that gave that to me. I like Gemini. It's not quite as good as ChatGPT for me, but it keeps getting better. And I do think the version 2 of Gemini is notably better than its past versions. But one of the tools it released in the last 8 weeks is this deep research component, where instead of just asking a question, you can actually propose a research study of a topic that you want, and then it will go through and evaluate 20, 50, 100 different web pages, pick the ones that it's most interested in, and then create a briefing for you along with citations. Now, that all sorts of stuff came out about OpenAI's deep research, which is only available in their, and I can't remember what the $200 a month one is, if it's pro or if it's advanced or whatever the $200 a month level is. But apparently the deep research is really, 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 really good. But that said, Gemini's is also great, right? And I'm sure that the deep research in ChatGPT's advanced version, which at some point will be available in the $20 a month tier and the free tier, it has some advantages to it. But Perplexity jumped in this past week, and it also now has a research a research tool. What's interesting about their tool is that it gives you not a ton, but some deep research pieces in the free tier. So I currently have, I picked it up a couple weeks ago because I was using it for a particular thing at work, a month's worth of Perplexity Advanced. But so far, it's a pretty interesting phenomenon for sure, and it works just like it does in Google DeepMind, or I'm sorry, I should say Google Gemini, and from what I've seen of screenshots with OpenAI. Now, when I talk about teachers with this, I do kind of get the yet another way for students to do work for you. But I see this in terms of having like the ultimate research assistant, right? Like if you are working in a lot of different areas, or if your job requires that sometimes you do research on something you're not 100% familiar with. I've been a curriculum director before. I still do work a lot in curriculum. Very few people have a wide range of content area backgrounds, but asking a deep research tool, whether it's OpenAI or Perplexity or Gemini, something along the lines of, please research current issues in math instruction, or all the 2024 research in, Flibberty gibbets. And, it's going to come back with you with a pretty decent briefing. Well, I mean, that's how executives learn information, right? That someone else, creates something for them. And I think that's pretty fascinating. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think we both listened to Hard Fork and have heard Casey Newton, extol how fantastic it is, and that it's worth it. I mean, $200 a month is that's a pretty sizable subscription.
Yeah.
And we can also, just be assured that most likely, these capabilities are coming soon to a computer near you and I for less. But right now it is pretty expensive.
Yeah, it is. Although I think I remember the conversation you're talking about on Hard Fork. Casey Newton said that right now it's worth the $200 a month for him, right? And, I would have to cancel all my other AI subscriptions, plus some Netflix, plus, pitch in some extra cash to get to $200 a month. But it is super interesting that for that particular consumer, right, who is a very nuanced user, I'm assuming, of AI, that the $200 a month is worth it to him.
This caused me to, I was looking up the pro, ChatGPT, and then just looking at Sora. I can now do 480p videos up to 10 seconds with Sora, and I can do 720 at 5 seconds. And so, anyway, I just uploaded a picture from Christmas, and it is, man, it's mind blowing. It's mind blowing.
Yep.
Huh. So, what if you're I think you answered this last time. Last time, I think for one model, you're on a desert island. It's still ChatGPT for you. Is that correct?
Yeah.
One? Yeah.
Now, that said, I have a nuanced answer why, and that's custom GPTs.
Yeah, right. Because you're pretty heavily invested in those. So, wow. Did we talk about killer robots and Google with AI weapons last time? I don't think
I
we
don't
did.
think we did. I think we should though.
No, I'll mention that one real quick. So this is under our same Google category. Back in 2005, is that right? No, 2015. 2015. When I was teaching in Yukon, Oklahoma, there was a United Nations big conference on killer robots, and that seemed a bit premature at the time, but it really wasn't. This is an article from February 5th from The Guardian. Google owner drops promise not to use AI for weapons. So Alphabet, the parent company of Google, used to have guidelines, and they specifically, at some point Google said, we're not evil, but they did have things in their guide. They had terms in their guidelines that specifically said they would not pursue technologies that could, quote, cause or are likely to cause overall harm. And that is now no longer present in the Google guidelines. So I also put the link to the stopkillerrobots.org website, which is pretty old actually, but more relevant than ever with all the different things going on with regard to drones and these technologies.
Well, and the one thing I would also say too is that I hope it's because they're working on defensive tools, right? But there are an awful lot of what seems like Google insiders, like employees, that seem lately to be discontented. So who knows what that means? But yeah, I didn't put it in there. I did see an article to say that apparently Iran released footage today of an autonomous suicide drone that they launched from a submarine that was AI powered, and I presume actually that can't be the first of those types of devices. It's just maybe the first from Iran, the first making headlines, but I do think that there is a relatively scary future of AI fighting that can be a part of this process, and we should be concerned.
Yeah. I'll drop in this link. I just started. No, that's not it, huh? There's a book that a classmate in a squadron of mine has written, and there it is, Hunter Killer: The True Story of the Drone Mission that Killed Anwar al-Awlaki. It is about the Predator drone, and this is a friend of mine that I went to the Air Force Academy with and was in the upper class squadron with for 3 years, and I just we're not studying military history, we're not studying military tactics in most schools. As prevalent as armed conflict is in the world, I really think that we should be spending more time talking about conflict and talking about the resolution of those conflicts. And so anyway, that's kind of an eye-opener. I'll do 2 more quick Google articles and we'll finish out that actual category. Google pulled Gemini out of its search app on iOS. So I don't know how often you're using the Google app. I tend to use it when I need to verify, my account. It says open the Google account. And anyway, I just usually Google from within Safari. But the article, which is TechCrunch from today, says that Google is wanting to basically promote its Gemini exclusive app to compete with ChatGPT and Claude and these other kinds of apps. And so now you can't have that functionality of Gemini inside the Google app. You've got to download the Gemini app. And then this is a carryover from last week. This is an NPR article from the 5th of February, 6 unsettling thoughts Google's former CEO has about artificial intelligence. And I had used clips from a video that Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, had given this interview and talked about a lot of things, but including AI chatbots. But the 6 things that they say are takeaways from Schmidt: AI is going to be available to almost anyone, and he talks about DeepSeek and showing that basically unbounded, unrestricted AI models are not going to be hard to utilize and be able to obtain. AI can be used by demagogues. People are interacting right now with tech they don't fully grasp and understand. Tech leaders don't necessarily grasp the implications either, and people might allow themselves to be governed by AI. the concentration of power that we saw in the inauguration with all the tech CEOs at the top. Anyway, is a bit, well, it's just a sign of the times of where we are. So
Yeah.
I think that actually wraps up the Google articles. There was one other one that related to military, and I put this one under miscellaneous, and this was from the Journal. I actually got this from AI. I asked ChatGPT, hey, use your search features and give me 10 headlines and articles that are significant to educational technology, and most of them came from the Journal. But this is from yesterday, February 18th. It says Microsoft transitioning away from HoloLens mixed reality software. It references in here the Department of Defense's contract, which was over $20 billion in 2021, that was to basically focus on having these mixed reality headsets that soldiers were going to wear into combat. And a friend that we have in the military, back in Kansas had shared with me about this and them dropping it. They were just disappointed. It had latency. It just wasn't functioning. And what the article says is that whole technology is not being dropped, but the company Anduril is going to be picking up that contract, and Microsoft is going to be continuing to work with them. So again, the military and the warfare from an offensive as well as I'm sure defensive capability continues to drive a lot of technology, and we're going to continue to see spillover effects of that, or spillover potential in that in the consumer world and the gaming world. And we're, as generative AI comes into that world, it's definitely going to be much more interesting, I think, because the cost as well as just the utility of using these GWiz. Oh, cool! You're, taking a virtual field trip and seeing something and moving some things around. It just really feels to me like kind of a party trick more than like, oh wow, look, you've acquired some skills and you're demonstrating things that are going to really, help you do things in life. I don't think we're there yet, but.
Well, and the other thing I would say, just generally about I think it's easy to point fingers at Microsoft here, but the answer is that I think this is a problem across a lot of these more edge hardware cases. Is that I just can't imagine how frustrating it must be for schools that invest in this stuff, usually after a pretty hearty sales pitch. And by the way, I did a HoloLens thing at ISTE probably 8-9 years ago, and it was cool, right? I still, questioned like how much a classroom would use these devices, right? And we went through a virtual museum, which was pretty cool, but I just, and of course, when you're being guided through it by a vendor, and again, this is not about Microsoft, it's about, well, really everyone in the industry, but you're getting a lot of kind of chit chat or suggestions that aren't necessarily, realistic of the classroom. But if you're spending, $2K on a headset, right? And by the way, schools don't pay $2,000 for a desktop or a laptop that they're going to be using for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, right? But if you're spending $2,000 on a headset and it gets pulled out 6 times a year, right? And the software is kind of a unitasker, that's just not a good investment for schools. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so disappointed that Google Cardboard didn't go further, because I felt like that was the closest something I've seen about being a realistic kind of augmented reality or virtual reality play. Even though the technology had limitations to it for sure, it at least was doable for schools, right? Maybe you weren't using the cardboard, maybe you got the red, I'm trying to remember what the name of the old tech was with the spinny discs on them. In fact, I have one of those headsets sitting somewhere in my basement because it was $11, right, to do that. But I think that's something we're still going to have to do. And I know some pretty high octane folks in the virtual reality, augmented reality space that have great ideas and grand plans for this. But I just don't think it's all that accessible to schools yet. And what happens when the stuff gets canceled, right, or doesn't go anywhere? It seems to me there's been an awful lot of that in this particular space.
Yeah, there's so much more fruitful ways to invest your limited technology dollars than in some of these GWiz VR things. This is my opinion at this point. But like you said, things could change, especially if things become more powerful and more possibilities through generative AI, and guardrails and training ends up being much more reliable and predictable, I guess, and
Yeah.
just and trustworthy. So, all right, well, shall we share some geeks of the week before we have to sign off?
Yeah, I have two tools that I want to share. They both kind of do the same thing, and you mentioned some iOS native things that do similar things to this as well. But the first one is Whisper is OpenAI's speech to text technology that has been plugged into a thousand different tools. But I found a local app that you can download on the M1, or I should say the Apple Silicon Macs. Apparently, it also works on Intel Macs as well, but I can't imagine it would be all that good. But what's cool about Mac Whisper, the free version allows you to download a localized AI model. And they save the advanced versions for the Pro version. It was just a one-time license. It's not a subscription or anything. And I have found it to be an extremely quick, but also effective either video or audio file transcriber. And so much so that I stopped using the free version, and actually they have an education version that you can buy for $30, one-time fee, and download their better models. And it can do all sorts of things, including recording your meeting or recording you directly, or you can drag an app, a video file or an audio file to it. And especially with the faster models, today I had a 90-minute long legislative hearing that I was able to download in an MP3, and it created a very solid transcription for me in about 4 minutes. And so I just dragged it onto this, and it worked great. So it's called Mac Whisper. And again, if you email them, they will give you a link that you can go to where it's not $50 one-time fee, it's $30 one-time fee. And to be honest, it would be worth it at double the price.
And Whisper is OpenAI. That is a tool, I think, right? That was developed by OpenAI.
Yeah, and I believe it's also open source too.
This is an implementation of it. And just our conversations tonight about assessment and AI and thinking about voice, I think I'm going to experiment with some assessments this year that involve student recording of audio, but then transcriptions, and then using AI to help me assess answers and things. So anyway, this is great. This is great. I'd already mentioned the Oasis and that blog post. I also have a downloadable AI tool that this one happens to be free and open source. I've been using upscale.media to, in fact, every time I do a thumbnail for our show, I do that on a Google slide, but the resolution is rather poor on a downloaded Google slide JPEG, and so I throw that into upscale.media, and boom, it converts it for whatever reason. And I don't think I had really converted it; just wouldn't let me do that on any of my Google accounts. I used to be able to go to different Google accounts, so I, of course, asked ChatGPT, what are some other free alternatives to be able to upscale images? And so this upscale is spelled UPSCAYL. The tagline is from science fiction to reality, supercharging your images with AI. But even on my school laptop, I could just run it right off of the DMG. I didn't have to drag it over the application file. And it took a little bit longer, just by a few more seconds, really, than the website. And boom, I have a really nice high resolution 3,000, 4,000 something pixel version of an image that was like 800 by something. So pretty cool. And then also, this is a new term for me. I had explored a little bit Flourish, which is a data analytics and data visualization tool. And I think it's a bit more advanced than what my middle schoolers are going to be doing in web design. But this term is called scrolly telling. And so Flourish has what they say is a no-code solution empowering you to create captivating and immersive storytelling experiences. And I am talking to my kids a lot about storytelling as we're looking at websites. What kind of story is this site trying to tell? How are they doing it? And being able to do that visually, I think, is a very, very important skill. So you can just scroll down and they're going to show you all about this tool. And I think these kinds of tools, visual storytelling, visual communication, these kinds of things are essential, not just for those of us teaching web design, but those of us teaching communication and teaching literacy and trying to help students become more literate and more powerful and capable communicators in the 21st century. So have you heard of scrollytelling before, Jason?
No, that's an interesting new term to me.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, where can folks find you when you're not basking in the spring and summer-like sunshine of negative, 40 degrees outside, but virtually it looks like you're down in Phoenix?
Yep. AICenters.com is the place to find me on the interwebs. And yourself, sir?
I am linked up at wesfryer.com. So you have been listening to the EdTech Situation Room. We are a almost every week Wednesday night podcast. You can find us at edtechsr.com. Subscribe to us on YouTube, where our videos that are live on Wednesdays, and we'd love for you to join us live in the chat, are immediately not only recorded, but also transcribed. And we want to encourage you to follow us on Facebook. We need to get up to 100 followers on Facebook to be able to stream live there as well. But this really is, Jason, and my opportunity to chew the fat and jump into the EdTech news world and the tech news world. So we hope you found this helpful. We hope to connect with you, and we'd love to know if you're listening. So please let other people know about us. And until next time, stay savvy, stay safe, and dare I say, stay warm, particularly if you live in the northern tier.
Good night.
Good night.